I knew something was off the moment the janitor, Steve, handed me my pay stub with a confused look and said, "Is direct deposit to limbo a new feature now?" That's when it hit me. Nathan Carrington, our newly appointed VP of Operations and walking HR violation, had finally broken payroll with his beloved automation overhaul. His words, not mine. For context, my name doesn't matter. I was the payroll compliance manager at Kinsley Dynamics, a mid-sized tech company with a bloated ego and a penchant for buzzwords. My job wasn't glamorous. No one ever notices the person who makes sure your W-2 doesn't summon the IRS like a demon from an ancient tax code. But if I did it wrong, you bet they'd notice. I wasn't looking for applause, but I sure wasn't expecting to be treated like a glorified button pusher by a guy who once asked me if Fika was a new dating app. Now, before I get too deep, quick note. If you're one of the 97% of people who listen and never subscribe, go ahead, tap that button. It costs you nothing and keeps this caffeine-fueled crew running. All right, back to the disaster. So, Nathan got promoted because he shared a last name with the company founder, not because he knew what deferred comp meant. He could confidently mispronounce infrastructure in front of the board and still walk out with catered lunch and equity options. Overnight, he became VP of Ops, with zero ops experience, unless you count steering his dad's yacht while sipping canned mojitos. One Friday, he walked into the break room and said we needed to modernize payroll. Cost-cutting, he called it. Translation: he fired the only part-time accountant who actually knew federal withholding from a hole in the wall, and he installed a shiny new payroll system he found in a Reddit ad under Startups Disrupting Payroll. We called it HyperProPay. I called it a disaster with a loading bar. It was glitchy from day one. Freelancers were misclassified as full-time. Full-timers were suddenly listed as contractors. People were showing up in my office with stubs showing deductions for other and my C, which is corporate code for "we don't know where your money went." Every time I flagged these bugs, Nathan waved me off like I was paranoid, said I was resistant to innovation. So I created a folder on my desktop. Resistance to Nathan. Inside, screenshots, email chains, audit flags, and internal reports. All time-stamped, all ignored. See, in compliance, we don't yell. We document. And my documentation? It was starting to look like the Dead Sea Scrolls of payroll malpractice. I gave Nathan one soft warning. Just one. I told him, the system is misclassifying workers. We could be looking at labor law violations. He laughed, said, "Relax, it's not like the IRS is watching." So I added that quote to the folder too. Then came the all-hands Zoom. Nathan stood there in his AirPods and bravado, announcing we were streamlining administrative roles while staring directly at my camera tile, like he was waiting for applause. Nobody clapped. A few people looked down. I muted myself and added a bullet point to my internal list. Public downsizing threat. Time-stamped. But I didn't quit. I knew what I did mattered. I was the spine of that system, the firewall between corporate ignorance and a six-figure fine. And I knew one day, not today, maybe not even this quarter, but one day, Nathan would push the wrong button. I just didn't think it'd come in the form of a reply-all email with the subject line, Organizational Streamline. We'll approve your unemployment, sweetheart. It started with silence. No CCs, no Slack pings, no, "Can you take a quick look?" Just decisions made without me. I was being phased out like an old printer or a motivational poster that had lost its laminate. HyperProPay, because every terrible software has to sound like an energy drink, was going live in chunks. No testing, no versioning, just button smashing and praying to the gods of broken APIs. The system was built by code bros who had probably never filed a W-4 in their life. It didn't recognize shift differentials. PTO? Treated like a suggestion. Tax status? Defaulted to single zero for everyone, including a married father of 5 with a military spouse. His entire paycheck got swallowed by federal withholding. He thought the IRS had frozen his identity. I spent 45 minutes walking him through a correction form while he chain-smoked Camels on speakerphone in his truck. Then came the real horror. Contractors showing up as full-time employees. Full-timers listed as contractors. Overtime vanished. People working 60-hour weeks getting paid for 38. Sick leave deducted from base pay. Tax forms with blank spaces where Social Security numbers should have been. At first, I flagged it internally. I sent Nathan emails titled things like, "Urgent, payroll misclassification, immediate review required." Most replies? Noted. Sometimes just a thumbs-up emoji. A thumbs-up emoji from a man who once scheduled a department-wide meeting called Kegerator Brainstorm. So, I did what any woman in my position learns to do after years of being told to calm down. I opened a private Google Drive folder, named it, "Oh, really, Nathan?" I started uploading everything, screenshots of misclassified roles, PDF copies of employee complaints, backup spreadsheets, email chains with no responses, Slack messages with time-stamped cries for help. Every time someone cried in my office, I logged it. Every time Nathan approved a change without consulting compliance, I documented it. By the end of the month, I had over 80 entries in that folder. And here's the kicker. I still wasn't angry, not really. What I felt was colder, sharper. That kind of quiet rage that settles in your spine and waits. I didn't want revenge. I wanted structure. I wanted to build a case so airtight it would leave a paper cut on Nathan's perfectly moisturized ego. Then the cracks began to show. It started with an email from a QA engineer. "Hey, my pay stub says I'm a 1099 contractor now. Do I need to invoice someone?" She wasn't the only one. Over the next week, 6 more emails rolled in. Same story. Full-time employees suddenly being treated like freelancers. One guy asked if he could start deducting lunch now that he was self-employed. I replied with a single line, "Please direct this concern to VP Nathan Carrington for clarification." And every time I hit send, I BCC'd myself. Because here's the thing about compliance. It's not just about catching the fall. It's about knowing when the rope has already snapped. Then it landed. The sucker punch. Subject line. Restructuring update. Please read immediately. No greeting. No warning. Just 3 paragraphs of corporate sludge trying to pass as strategy. Nathan's email read like a eulogy for my career, written by a guy who thinks severance is a type of cheese. Buried in bullet points was the line, "We will approve your unemployment, sweetheart." Sweetheart. From a man who once asked me if quarterly taxes were like coupons for the government. I stared at the screen, heart pounding like a washing machine mid-cycle. The disrespect. The absolute idiocy of firing your compliance manager in a reply all. And it was sent to everyone. Sales, marketing, HR. Even 3 engineers in Oregon who probably didn't know I existed. For 5 seconds, I felt the flush of humiliation. But then, it cooled. Because Nathan had just confirmed my termination in writing to the entire company, with no NDA, no HR documentation, no exit process. And with that smug little sweetheart cherry on top, it wasn't just petty. It was actionable. So I did what needed to be done. I hit reply all. Thanks for confirming my employment status. Wishing everyone a smooth quarter-end close. Then I added one more name to the CC line. Deborah Simmons, senior investigator at the State Labor Compliance Office. We'd spoken before, hypothetically. She was sharp, calm, and just nosy enough to care. I didn't write her a note. I didn't need to. The thread said everything for me. Timestamp, corporate letterhead, termination, language, public record. I hit send. No fireworks, no drama. Just a soft whoosh and a dopamine pop. Across the office, Nathan walked out of his glass-walled ego chamber, grinning like he'd just executed a flawless corporate power move. He fist-bumped one of the sales bros, strolled toward the break room like a man who hadn't just pulled the pin on his own grenade. But the thing about reply all? Once it's out there, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to everyone, including the state. The Monday after my sunset, I woke up at 7:15 a.m., purely out of habit. My work laptop sat on the kitchen counter, closed, unbothered, like a veteran warhorse that had finally been honorably discharged. For the first time in 6 years. No Slack pings, no quick queue emails, no last-minute fire drills. Just the hum of my refrigerator pretending it still mattered. I brewed real coffee, not break room sludge, not freeze-dried despair. The good kind. Slow drip, dark roast, silence. At 8:32 a.m., the first email hit. Subject: Hey, real quick, who do I talk to about missing overtime? It was from Tanya in DevOps. She'd been on back-to-back weekend sprints. Her stub showed payment for 80 hours. She was owed 104. I read it twice. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the Oh Really Nathan folder and created a new subfolder, Phase 2, Fallout. At 9:11 a.m., another message came in. Subject: Tax status incorrect? Jerry in support. His W-4 had been changed from married with 2 to single with 0. Half his paycheck vanished into federal withholding. He was panicking. Rent due, 2 toddlers. Still, I said nothing. By 11:40 a.m., 4 more emails had rolled in. QA testers, shift leads, someone from HR. All confused, all underpaid, all desperate. I no longer had system access, not officially, but I still had the PDFs, screenshots, and archived logs, and I knew HyperProPay better than anyone left standing. So I drafted a message. Not to the company, to Deborah. Subject: Payroll concerns. Follow-up. Hi again, Deb. Seems my termination has created a few growing pains in payroll. Attached are sample cases of misclassification and withholding discrepancies flagged prior to my departure. File names include dates and employee initials. Happy to provide more if needed. Best, redacted. I attached 6 files, just the essentials. Clean, organized, no commentary. 20 minutes later, her reply came. Thank you. This is extremely helpful. I'll be in touch shortly. Just like that, the tone shifted. I wasn't a disgruntled ex-employee anymore. I was a source. A documented, polite, and heavily archived source. Meanwhile, back at Kinsley Dynamics, things were starting to crack. 2 days later, I got a call from Jamie in finance. Old colleague, old friend. She whispered like we were in a mob movie. Did you see the Jacobs email? Jacobs Consulting, one of our 2 biggest clients, had flagged their year-end reconciliation. One of their contractors, processed through our system, had received both a W-2 and a 1099 for the same calendar year. That's like saying you're both an employee and a raccoon. It doesn't fly. I nodded into the silence. Yeah, I said. I saw. The next day, another message, this time from Maple Group. Client number 2. Formal inquiry. Their contractors received pay stubs with no state tax withholding, just blank boxes. Turns out HyperProPay had silently disabled auto tax settings for 7 states. 7. Nathan was unraveling. I could tell by the desperate Slack messages Jamie forwarded me. Looking into it, probably a form issue. Might be legacy data corruption. Should resolve next cycle. Let's not overreact. But people did overreact. When employees get duplicate tax forms, when severance shows up unannounced, when rent is due and the paycheck is MIA, people talk. I didn't talk. I didn't even blink. I just opened my spreadsheet, added a new line. Batch 199. Error. Feb 14. Classification. Conflict with affected names, timestamps, and system version numbers. Then I sent a summary report, cleaned, anonymized, to Deborah. Subject: New development. Classification. Default post update. Deborah, HyperProPay's default settings appear to have changed during a silent back-end update. Several salaried employees are now classified as contractors. Summary attached. Will continue to monitor and forward as needed. Her reply came within the hour. This aligns with other data we're seeing. Please continue forwarding as able. Appreciate your discretion. Discretion. Funny word. From someone who got fired in a reply all and called sweetheart on the way out. Meanwhile, inside the company, panic was simmering. Nathan tried damage control. He sent a company-wide email titled Payroll Clarification and System Enhancements, where he assured everyone that minor classification inconsistencies were being addressed and that external audit reviews were just a normal part of company growth. He ended it with, "Let's all stay positive and focused. We're building something great." But they weren't building anything. They were duct taping holes in a dam with branded Post-its, and I knew exactly how much pressure was building behind those cracks, because this wasn't revenge, it was gravity, and Nathan had just cut the rope. Then came the formal letter, a full-body blow delivered by email. Subject line: Notice of Formal Investigation, Wage and Classification Compliance. It landed in the inbox of Kinsley Dynamics Legal Department at 10:04 a.m. Standard language, clinical tone, but the message was clear. The State Labor Compliance Office was initiating an official audit. Paragraph 3 was the kill shot. This inquiry has been initiated following a documented complaint from a former employee supported by multiple substantiating artifacts pertaining to payroll classification errors, wage discrepancies, and withholding failures over the last 2 fiscal quarters. Translation: They had receipts. My receipts. For the next 24 hours, the office went into lockdown mode. Legal started pulling logs. HR started whispering. Nathan, oblivious as ever, reportedly told Peter Linton, our CEO, that it was just boilerplate audit stuff, probably because we're scaling. Scaling, right. What was actually scaling was the number of misfiled tax documents and panicked employees. I heard from Jamie the next morning. 6:38 a.m. She texted me through an encrypted app we used as a joke for gossip and doomsday prepping. "Is this you? Be honest." She attached a screenshot of the audit email. I replied, "Not me, just procedure." She sent back, "Well, procedure is making Nathan sweat through his chair." Then another screenshot, this one from their internal payroll queue. A batch of 1099s had been sent to 42 full-time employees, not temps, not contractors, full-time salaried staff, some of whom had worked at Kinsley longer than Nathan had been out of college. Turns out, HyperProPay had defaulted everyone to contractor during a back-end agility update. Translation: Someone clicked a button they didn't understand. And now, on paper, half the company looked like Uber drivers. Worse, those 1099s had already been mailed. Employees were getting them at home. Spouses were asking questions. Accountants were confused. One guy thought he'd been fired. Another tried to use TurboTax to file as a sole proprietor and nearly had a breakdown in the copy room. I didn't gloat. I didn't reply with an "I told you so." I opened my log, added, "Batch 199, Feb 14, 1099, error, 42 salaried." Jamie sent me the time of send, the affected employee names, the software version number. I backed it up to an encrypted USB and forwarded a clean summary to Deborah. New development. Appears post-update default changed all statuses to contractor. Summary attached. She replied, "This aligns with other evidence. Please continue." Inside Kinsley, Nathan began to spiral. He sent an internal email chain titled Urgent Audit Alignment, Do Not Share. In it, he asked if someone could backdate employee classification changes to make them look more like contractor transitions. Then he wrote the line that deserves a place in corporate hell. We should align current pay cycles to whatever reflects the cleanest version of the truth. The cleanest version of the truth. That phrase alone should have disqualified him from leadership. He CC'd legal, HR, and the CFO. But 3 emails down, the fatal wound appeared. Nathan attached a spreadsheet titled Reclassification Plan, Draft Only. In it, he had manually changed employee types after the state had already requested records. Worse, the metadata showed the file was created that morning. And guess what? Deborah already had the originals. She had the payment logs, the W-2s, the 1099s, the classification lists. She had files printed and mailed 2 weeks earlier. By the time Nathan's spreadsheet began circulating, someone had already leaked it. It wasn't me. It didn't need to be me, because silence, when well documented, echoes, and it spreads. I was sitting at home, watering my monstera plant, listening to the quiet unravel like a fraying office cable. No headlines yet, no lawsuits, no pink slips, but I could feel it coming. The tension in the air was thick, like heat before a thunderstorm. I added Nathan's spreadsheet to the archive, labeled the folder, Exhibit D, done. The collapse came during Q2 strategy meeting, one of those overly catered, overconfident boardroom sessions that smelled like ambition and stale pastry. Peter was mid-sentence talking about expansion into the Southwest when his phone buzzed. Not the casual ding, a hard, no-ignoring buzz. He checked the screen, froze, then set the phone down, folded his hands, looked across the room. "Nathan," he said, voice cold and sharp. "You have 5 minutes to explain why our entire payroll system is frozen under state audit." Nathan's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a goldfish trying to explain quantum mechanics. His face went sheet white. He reached for his laptop like there might be an escape hatch in one of his spreadsheets. "I think it's a misunderstanding," he stammered. "We're transitioning systems. There were some legacy data conflicts. Nothing illegal, just procedural friction." Peter didn't blink. He didn't look at the others. His eyes were locked on Nathan. One of the board members, a woman in a burgundy pantsuit who had survived 3 recessions and a hostile takeover, tilted her head slightly and asked, almost politely, "Didn't she warn you?" Another board member, this one from finance, cleared his throat and added, "Her compliance logs. They were intact, correct? You didn't delete those?" Nathan looked at the ceiling like he was praying for a PowerPoint slide to descend from heaven and save him. "She was difficult," he said. "She didn't support the shift to hyperpropay. She was resistant." "That's funny," Peter said, his tone still calm, still quiet. "Because the auditor just quoted a report she submitted before you implemented it, a report that outlines almost every issue we're now under investigation for." The silence that followed could have peeled the paint off the walls. Peter reached for his phone again and said, "Effective immediately, we are freezing all payroll-related operational decisions. Marjorie will lead compliance restoration." Then he looked at Nathan and added, "You are not to touch another system. Do not send an email. Do not speak to anyone without legal present. In fact," and here his voice dropped a note lower, "leave the room." Nathan stood slowly. For a second, it looked like he might argue, but no words came. He reached for his tablet, knocked over his water glass, muttered something that sounded like, "Okay," and left the room. The door clicked shut behind him. No one spoke for a long while. Then the woman in burgundy said, "Well, it appears your payroll department was more essential than previously appreciated." Peter didn't respond. He just stared at his phone, the state audit email still glowing on the screen, the state seal front and center. You could see the moment it hit him. Not just the audit, not just the mess, but the weight of who he'd trusted. Across town, I was folding laundry when Jamie sent me a message. One line. "Accounts frozen. Legal called it procedural sabotage. They're eating each other alive." I smiled. Not out of gloating, not out of vengeance, just quiet recognition. Because justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and gavel slams. Sometimes it shows up in a boardroom with a frozen phone and a question you don't have an answer to. The next morning, just after sunrise, my dog snored at my feet and the coffee machine hummed like it had purpose. My phone rang. Unknown number. Something told me to answer. "Hi," said a voice, crisp and calm. "This is Deborah Simmons with the State Labor Compliance Office." Her tone was like someone who alphabetizes their spice rack and keeps backup ink cartridges, just in case. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Your documentation was unusually thorough. Honestly, it's rare we receive a case this clean." I let the silence hang for a moment. "It was never about revenge," I said. "It was just about doing it right." "Well," she said, "you did it right enough that our department is considering bringing on outside consultants to assist with future audits. If you're open to it, we'd love to talk more. Not now, but when you're ready." I told her I'd think about it. After we hung up, I just sat there, letting the steam from my coffee rise into the morning light. Outside, my neighbor was scraping frost off her windshield with a laminated Starbucks card. The world kept turning. Then Jamie sent me the article. Headline: Kinsley Dynamics faces formal state audit following payroll scandal. There it was. Dry. Clinical. No drama. Just facts. But one sentence stood out. VP of Operations Nathan Carrington has been placed on administrative suspension pending investigation. That's corporate for he's toast, but legal hasn't finished buttering him yet. Even better was the final paragraph, quoting an anonymous employee saying staff were demanding clarity, accountability, and back pay. I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the rhythm. That was a revolt by spreadsheet, the best kind. I didn't post. I didn't toast. I didn't tweet. I just took another sip of coffee. It was dark, hot, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't taste like despair. Because when they fired me, they thought they were trimming fat. What they didn't realize was, I wasn't the fat, I was the spine. Because when they fired me, they thought I was redundant. Dead weight. A legacy cost to cut. They didn't realize I was the one quietly holding it all together. I wasn't the fat. I was the framework, the internal stability beneath their chaos, the one who turned scattered ambition into actual results, the one who caught mistakes before they metastasized, the one who stayed up past midnight drafting memos no one read and warning people who didn't listen. Turns out, software doesn't write risk mitigation reports at 2 a.m. It doesn't hear someone cry about a missing paycheck and go find the error by sunrise. Software doesn't know how to say, "You're not crazy, this is broken, and I can prove it." Software doesn't know where the bones are buried. I did. Back at Kinsley Dynamics, the ripple had become a wave. It started with a call to the help desk from a warehouse foreman in Iowa who hadn't been paid in 2 cycles. Then 2 more from customer service agents in Arizona asking why their severance checks had arrived when they hadn't been laid off. Within days, the internal support queue was swamped. Direct deposits missing. Tax forms duplicated. Employee statuses mismatched. Some were listed as contractors and freelancers simultaneously. Others? Ghosts. Invisible to the system. HyperProPay was imploding from within. Bounced ACH transfers. Error code 312. Classification conflict. Undefined pay type. Translation? The software didn't know if people were staff, temps, freelancers, or urban legends. Nobody could get paid, and nobody could explain why. The CFO, Marjorie, walked into a 9:00 a.m. exec meeting and reportedly asked, "Why are we receiving state letters accusing us of wage theft?" Nathan handed her a PowerPoint deck titled Process Realignment Timeline. By slide 3, she shut her laptop and said, "You're not realigning anything. You're detonating it." Employees began waking up to the problem. Two senior developers threatened to sue when their HSA contributions disappeared mid-quarter. A junior marketing analyst posted in the general Slack channel, "Can someone explain why my W-2 says I live in Nevada? I've never even been to Nevada." One engineer, who had a diabetic child, found out his insurance had lapsed without notice. People were talking, not just to each other, but to HR, to lawyers, to journalists. And Nathan, true to form, panicked in prose. He started an internal email thread titled, "Urgent Audit Alignment Response. Do not share." Classic. In the chain, he asked if someone could backdate employee status transitions to reflect more contractor-style engagements. He also wrote, and I quote, "We should align current pay cycles to whatever reflects the cleanest version of the truth." That sentence deserves a place in a museum. He attached a spreadsheet titled Reclassification Plan, Draft Only. It showed manual reassignments made after documents had already been submitted to the state. The metadata showed it was created that morning. Deborah already had the originals. She had the W-2s, the 1099s, the timestamps, the classification logs. And someone, not me, leaked that spreadsheet. I didn't need to, because at that point, my silence was louder than Nathan's hysteria. And silence echoes. It makes people ask questions in rooms he's no longer invited to. That afternoon, while Kinsley scrambled, I watered my Monstera and watched the quiet unravel like office cable. Knotted, sticky, impossible to explain. No one had been fired yet, no lawsuits filed. But it was coming. You could feel it. I added Nathan's spreadsheet to the archive, labeled it Exhibit D, Done. I opened my laptop for the first time in days and typed one final line into the notes I'd kept since this all began. It wasn't a summary. It wasn't a threat. It was just a confirmation. I was never the problem. I had always been the solution. I was just confirming my status. Turns out, it's essential.